to another thing. The Albanese government. It's getting now that's a reputation for doing crazy things that it can't explain, like the voice debacle, or releasing foreign criminals into the community without making sure we're safe, or importing 540,000 immigrants in just 1 year, and without the housing for them all. But there's one thing it's done that could beat them all for sheer, inexplicable stupidity. Decided to bury 45 Taipan helicopters. It's just grounded rather than let Ukraine have them in its war with Russia. And I defy anyone to explain this. Certainly the Prime Minister today couldn't. Once again, no leadership, just pass the buck down the food chain.
We take advice from the Department of Defence on these matters.
Actually, Prime Minister, this is your call not to send them to Ukraine. The government grounded these helicopters last year after one crash, killing 4 servicemen on board. It decided it might be a fault with them. While the inquiry is going, why take the risk, the expense of keeping them flying, when we've in fact got new Black Hawk helicopters coming anyway? So Ukraine heard about all this, and its Chief of Defence Intelligence wrote 1 month ago to our Defence Minister, Richard Marles, asking to have these choppers, since we didn't want them. He said, "Our wounded are dying unnecessarily on the front because we cannot get them from the front to emergency care fast enough. We do not have helicopters that can rapidly deploy and evacuate our wounded." Do you know, 1 month on, this government still has not given Ukraine an answer. 1 month. Instead, it quietly went ahead with plans to strip those helicopters of spare parts and then bury the frames in the ground. Supporters of Ukraine are protesting what looks like sheer bureaucratic bastardry, laziness. I've got no explanation. And Defence Industries Minister Pat Conroy today, when he was asked for an explanation, seemed to make no sense at all. I mean, why couldn't Ukraine have helicopters we don't want?
And we do not know whether they're safe to fly. Secondly, to get them into a condition to provide to the Ukrainian government would require considerable taxpayers' expense and time and resources.
I mean, seriously, 2 things about that. First, the helicopters aren't safe. Well, maybe we let Ukraine be the arbiter of that. But look, in fact, the black box from that crash last year found no fault with the chopper. And other air forces are flying Taipans. If there was a real problem with them, they'd all have grounded them. And surely it is up to Ukraine to decide if they are too unsafe to fly. If it's too unsafe to fly the choppers, and let those injured die on the ground on the battlefield. That's a call that it can make. And how much would it really cost us to send them to the Ukrainians? How much is it going to cost us instead to bury them here, you know, in that environmentally approved, traditional owner approved and monitored and all testing, all leakage? How much would that cost us instead? What is this government thinking? Joining me is Peter Jennings. Now, he's had many national security jobs, including Deputy Secretary for Strategy in the Defence Department. He's now Director of Strategic Analysis Australia, former head of the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. Peter Jennings, great to have you on board. Listen, the government is saying it would rather bury these helicopters than let Ukraine have them. What part of that don't I understand?
The same part I don't understand. It's mystifying. It's one of the most puzzling decisions I've seen a government make in national security. And I've been in the business for over 30 years, Andrew. It's bizarre. And I think, frankly, the government is overplaying this issue of safety. It was very strange to have the helicopters permanently grounded after that tragic fatal accident. When 2 Black Hawk helicopters crashed 20 years ago, killing 18 people, the Black Hawk was up in the sky operating very, very quickly thereafter. That's what Defence forces do. What we have here is some very lengthy investigations, which will probably take months to complete, which I think are being used as a sort of a cover to justify a completely unjustifiable decision, which is to say we could have provided those airframes to the Ukrainians. They could have been supported by other European countries, many of whom are flying Taipan helicopters or their equivalent right now. This decision is mystifying. It's the worst possible outcome. It's left our own forces lacking a helicopter capability that they need because the Black Hawks are not yet in service. This needs to be investigated. There needs to be some sort of parliamentary inquiry into what actually happened here. Who is advising what to whom?
Look, we're agreed. The safety argument is rubbish. I mean, for one, it's for Ukraine to decide whether it's too safe, right? Too unsafe. And two, as you say, there's no link between the safety and the crash last year. We don't know. We simply don't know. So it seems to me just an excuse. I don't know what it is. Have you got any idea about what's really going on here? I mean, is there a hidden reason that they're not telling us, or is this sheer bastardry or stupidity, or could there be another reason?
Well, I'll enter into speculation here because I don't know this for a fact, but I suspect that what Defence has been most concerned about was that it didn't want to wear the cost of getting the airframes over to Ukraine. And that's because the Albanese government told Defence several months ago now that any equipment that we were going to provide to Ukraine was actually going to come out of the Defence budget. And it may well be the case that Defence concluded that the cheapest thing to do for its own interests was to bury these things rather than to bear the brunt of paying what would be some millions of dollars, I guess, to have them crated up and sent over to Ukraine. That's the best that I can come up with, Andrew, is that things in this town usually revolve around money. And that may well have something to do with the outcome that we have here. The other thing that I think is worth pointing out from Pat Conroy's talk today was he said, well, we spent a couple of months looking to find potential purchasers. And I just make the point here, there is no government in the world which in the space of 8 or 10 weeks is going to come up with $1 billion to buy 55 airframes. It just doesn't happen that quickly. And the eagerness with which Defence then moved to start to disassemble these platforms strikes me as very strange indeed. And again, light needs to be shed on this. We need to get to the bottom of what happened here.
Look, I think your theory might be correct, which just throws the spotlight back on the Prime Minister. He said today, I'm just acting on Defence advice. No, it's the Prime Minister's call to say, look, the money for sending them over there comes to the Defence Department. That's his call. And it's also his call not to fund it. It's all on him, isn't it? I mean, it's an abrogation of his responsibility to just blame the army.
Absolutely. And, we don't elect governments in order to acquiesce and take stupid advice from any public service department or indeed the Australian Defence Force. They need to think for themselves. That's why ministers are there. Otherwise, we could replace them with, I guess, an artificial intelligence program or something of that nature. What it shows you, though, is that the Prime Minister is just not engaged on this topic. He doesn't seem to be across it. That says to me, was it actually discussed in the National Security Committee of Cabinet? You'd think a decision to actually break up $1 billion worth of helicopters was something that would have been discussed at the National Security Committee of Cabinet. I'm guessing that it might not have been.
But hello, how can that be? I mean, we are talking about a really serious thing. It's not just what do we do with $1 billion worth of a helicopter. It's not just that. It's also talking about aid to a country that desperately needs us, proving that we are worthy world citizens in the fight for democracy, because we will need these people, help ourselves to defend ourselves if everything hits the fan, say, with China. It just is one of the most bizarre things for a Prime Minister not to get involved in.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's worth also saying, Andrew, that the loss of this capability in the defence world, it's known as battlefield lift capability, was a decision taken several months before we started the flood season and the bushfire season, cyclone season through the South Pacific, where these helicopters would have a use. They also provide the fast response capability for the counter-terrorist teams that operate on the East Coast and the west coast of Australia if there's a terrorism incident. We do not have that capability right now. The Black Hawk helicopters, which we're acquiring to replace the Taipans, there's only 3 in country right now, and they've not yet been accepted into military service. So, consciously or not, the government took a decision to say we will simply not have this helicopter capability for an unspecified period of time. They don't know when the Black Hawks are going to be all right for service. So there's a domestic consequence. It limits our ability to do things like if we needed to go up to Papua New Guinea last week because of the rioting, happily we didn't need to, but if we needed to, it would have been a very useful capability to get around Port Moresby. There's the counter-terrorism dimension, there's the Ukraine dimension, and just the sheer dumbness of wasting an asset that might be useful on the second-hand market a year or 2 from now, but deciding after 8 or 10 weeks that that was not something to be taken seriously. This needs investigation. I have to repeat the point. It's one of the silliest decisions I've seen a government make.
I know. If they just explained it was something rational and didn't treat the whole nation like idiots, we could have a debate. But this is just insane. Peter Jennings, thank you so much for your time.